Hello, good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. So, welcome back this sunny afternoon in London. Um, my name is Francisco Horta. I'm alum from 2010. Very excited to be here in this festival. Also because we didn't have our 10-year because of COVID. So, very eager for, the presentations, the lectures, the parties. So I'm also proudly serving as a board member for the campaign, the leadership campaign. And today, I would like to highlight two things before introducing our lecture today. First of all, many places where we got alums from. So this is the chart that shows from around the world, I guess, basically everywhere. Lot also from North America, Europe, but a lot of South America, Australia, India, as usual. And now, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce the Professor Costas Markides, all the way from Cyprus, this Manchester United fan, which nowadays is not something that he really can be proud of. But he's going to have this lecture today on, rethinking strategy in today's new normal of disruption, continuous disruption. And that's why they invited me to host, because I'm from Brazil. So disruption in Brazil, so that's it.
Thank you very much.
Professor.
I'll take that. Thank you. There. It's always a good idea to start with applause in case you don't want to applaud at the end of the presentation. So thank you, Francisco. I don't know why I should be embarrassed about being a Manchester United fan. I'm sure there is quite a few of you who are Manchester United fans. Wow. See. Do you have any Liverpool fans in the... Oh, come on! Had we known you were Liverpool fans, maybe you wouldn't have graduated from London Business School. So anyway, thank you very much and welcome back to the school. I hope you're having a good time. I don't know in what state of mind I was 2 months ago when they asked me, can you come and talk, and what topic would you talk about? And I gave this topic about strategy. 4 o'clock on a Friday, talking about strategy. Oh my God, how can we make it entertaining and educational at the same time? I've been struggling with that for the last couple of days, and I've decided I cannot do it educational and entertaining, so I'm going to just make it educational. And if you fall asleep on me, which some of you may already have, given the statistics we have on the attention span of human beings, you know that exposure to the internet has physically rewired the neural networks in the brain. And one of the effects is that we are now much less attentive. We focus much less on whatever is happening around us. Whenever we are reading something, watching something, listening to something. Do you know what is the average attention span of the average human being in today's world? Just to give you a benchmark, we know what the attention span of the goldfish is, which is 9 seconds. What is that for a human being? 8 seconds. Okay, so that means I lost you 3 minutes ago. Hopefully you're still with me. So we're going to talk a little bit about strategy, strategy in today's new normal of continuous disruption. Let me start with my opening premise is that, the environment around us has changed enormously in the last 50 years. This is how it was 50 years ago. You're the captain of this boat and you're supposed to develop strategy. It wasn't a hard job, was it? You develop a strategy and you sail, and basically you had to, sail and defend the position you have and so on. Whereas today, what's happening, you're the captain of this boat. Every day looks like this, which basically means we're in an environment where you have many changes. They are all happening really fast and simultaneously. Can I take it that you accept this premise and then I move on with it? Because if you start questioning, is it really like this now, Costas? We're going to be here all day long. And besides, if you don't accept this premise, I'd like to ask you, why are you in a presentation whose topic is about disruption? I assume you accept the premise that we live in this kind of environment, all right? Total change out there, continuous disruption. And the question then is, in today's environment, it's created new challenges, especially about strategy. It's created leadership challenges as well. For example, I think, imagine being an employee on this boat. How do you feel? Are you frightened? Are you exhausted every day? You have to face the waves? Yeah. So one leadership challenge you face today is, how do you energize people? How do you fill them with that positive energy to come out and help you all the time with whatever disruption you're facing? I'm not going to talk about that. That's a leadership challenge. You have organizational challenges. For example, yesterday I talked a little bit about the challenge of agility. How do you make the organization agile to respond to these changes and so on? Today I'm going to focus it on strategy challenges. And in particular, I'm going to talk about two challenges. Why only two? Because we only have 45 minutes or so. So if you want more, buy the book, buy the book. It's Savio, you know this is a very good book, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have Alibaba's endorsement here, My father, 92-year-old man living in Cyprus, doesn't even speak English. He's already bought 50 copies of the book, okay? So I'm going to talk about just two challenges, if you understand. And before I even start talking about the challenges, can I please define what I think strategy is? Because I've been at London Business School now for 35 years. Believe it or not. I only look 30, I know, but I've been here 35 years. And what I've discovered in every conversation I've had with senior executives is that when you talk about strategy, everybody has a different definition of what strategy is. And you engage in these debates with people shouting and screaming, disagreeing, thinking that you're talking about the same topic. And in fact, you're talking about apples and oranges. And no wonder you cannot agree on whatever we're talking. So I'd like to give you my definition of strategy. You don't have to accept it, okay? You got the degree, you don't have to pass any exams anymore. But I cannot go on with my presentation before I define for you what I think strategy is. And for me, strategy is this. It's choices. Choices, choices, choices. I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. And the question, of course, is choices about what? Choices about what? It's about three things: the who, what, and the how, right? If you are an alumnus of London Business School, I hope this has not come as a surprise to you, okay? The who, what, how is the first framework we teach in day one of strategy, core strategy, isn't it? Anybody here who doesn't remember it? If you don't remember it, you probably slept through the whole bloody course. Or ask for your money back, because that means the professor who taught you strategy didn't teach you very well. Strategy is choices about the customers, what do we offer the customers, and the value chain activities of the firm. And the only thing I'm going to say here before I move on is that they are very difficult, these choices. They are very difficult to make. And they're very difficult because you're making them in the face of uncertainty. And when you're sitting there saying, should I target these customers or those customers, you don't know for sure. You could analyze, you could use your gut feel, you could experiment, but at a certain point, you have to make a call. And when you make that call, you don't know for sure if it's right or wrong. But what you know is if you made the wrong call, it's going to be fatal. If you choose, I'm going to focus on these customers and build my factory and produce this, and then 6 months down the road, you realize, oh shit, I made a mistake. It's too late. These strategy choices tend to be difficult to reverse. I'm not going to call them irreversible. They are difficult to reverse. It costs a lot of money to reverse them. So you're sitting there saying, oh my God, am I making the right call, and so on and so. It's difficult to make. And that's why I think Steve Jobs used to say that the most difficult word in strategy is the word no. The most difficult word in strategy is the word no. No, we're not going to do this. No, we're not going to invest in Latin America. No, we're not going to invest in AI. And when you say no, not even you know for sure you're making the right call, But people in your audience, your employees, may disagree with you. And they will be pissed off that you made a call that's different from what they are making a call on. So these choices are very difficult. Okay, let me give you a couple of examples very, very quickly to make this point, even though I assume based on the laughter I got 2 minutes ago when I said this should not be news to you, that you accept this as well. You know this thing, yeah? Get on with it, man. We did it for the MBA. All right. Let me give you a couple of very quick examples that I know personally because I wrote. One is my favorite one, Nespresso. You know now that Nespresso is a very successful product in the Nestle portfolio. They sell about 15 billion capsules every year at an average price of $1 each. Don't even ask me about the profit margin of these capsules. Okay, very, very profitable. But what most people don't know is that in the first 3 years of its introduction, it was a total failure. It was such a big failure that Nestle actually in 1989 decided to shut it down. They said this product will never break even. And the reason you have Nespresso today is because of one man, and the man is Jean-Paul Gaillard. This is the man. What did he do, this guy? Well, let me tell you, the original positioning of the product was a mass market positioning. When they introduced Nespresso back in the mid-80s, they said, what are we selling here is high-quality espresso coffee. Because the machine is very expensive, we are not going to sell it to individuals. We're going to sell it to small offices because they have a place where their employees can gather and have a coffee break. They're going to buy the machine. The employees will have a coffee break. And we're going to sell the capsules through supermarkets. It was a mass market positioning of the product. Okay? Very natural. Why? Because Nestle has 300 products in its portfolio at that time, and all of them are mass market. So it was very natural. They discovered a new product as a mass market. It was not doing well, didn't prove to be very, very successful. In comes Jean-Paul Gaillard, and the only thing he did, he changed the positioning of the product. He didn't change the product. He said, look, this is not a mass market product. It's an aspiration brand. We're going to make it the Louis Vuitton of coffee. You don't buy it only because it's good quality coffee. You buy it so that you feel good and you show off to your friends when you invite them for dinner parties. And after the dinner, when they say, I didn't like the food, you show up with the beautiful Nespresso tray and things like that. Up-market positioning. As a result of that, they changed the customer target. It's going to be yuppies. It's going to be young people. They recently got married. They move into their new flat, their new apartment. They want to, buy not only IKEA furniture, but also something beautiful for their kitchen. And, of course, you cannot sell it through a supermarket. You don't see Louis Vuitton selling these handbags through a supermarket. You're going to sell it through the exclusive distribution, the Nespresso Club. He just changed, the brand positioning, the who, what, how, and voila. The rest is history. 15 billion capsules. It was so successful, this repositioning, that if you go now and you look at the positioning of Nespresso now, 2025, you're going to see these same choices still there. The type of customer they are targeting, the value proposition of the product, the distribution, and so on. Very, very successful. But here's the question that I'm asking you now, and you go beyond strategy 101. They made these choices in 1990. Since then, it's been 35 years. Does that mean there is no more strategy? What did they do between 1990 and 2025? Can you imagine if you are the strategy director of Nespresso? What do you do every day? My brother in Cyprus, he used to be, when he was younger, the strategy director at his bank. And I said, what the hell do you do every day? What do you do? They pay you? What do you do every day? I mean, you made these choices. What is it that you do? It's an interesting question. What do they do every day after that? You made these choices, very, very successful. What do you do? And I hope you'll agree with me that there's two additional things you need to do after the initial choices. And what are they? Well, the first is, how do I grow the firm now? And the second is, how do I respond to changes around me? And in making answering this question, you have to make additional choices. For example, In trying to answer this question, you have to start making additional big decisions. The Nespresso case that I know, for example, in the mid-1990s, Starbucks showed up, and Nespresso was sitting there saying, whoa, how should we respond to Starbucks? Should we have a chain of Nespresso shops around the world selling coffee like Starbucks? Then they started saying we need to grow. How do we grow? Well, maybe we should move beyond espresso into latte and cappuccino and Americano, which means maybe I should make another machine that allows us to make these things. Or maybe, I don't know, should we open up the system? Because when they introduced the Nespresso system, you could only put Nespresso capsules into their machine. And they said, well, maybe we should open it now and allow anybody who produces the same capsules to use our machines. There are many additional questions that they made. Therefore, this is my definition of strategy. Strategy is made up of two things. It's the original positioning choices that the company has made, plus all the choices you have to make on a yearly basis that allow you to grow the firm and respond to changes. I want to emphasize this because whenever I talk with CEOs, they always talk about strategy is about the future. It's about what do we do. Yes, but the future has a shadow. And the shadow is the shadow of the past. You cannot ignore the positioning choices you made. London Business School made some positioning choices in 1963. They are still there. They are still there determining what do we do going forward. I'm not saying that they will always be there. I'm going to come back to this in a moment. But in many cases, the original positioning choices of the firm are there. Let me give you another example. One of my other favorite examples is Edward Jones in the United States. It's one very, very successful brokerage firm. Its success is based on a very unique strategy. It's so unique that Fortune magazine called them the Walmart of Wall Street. And what is the strategy for Edward Jones? It's very simple. They say, look, we're going to go to middle America, small town America, and we're going to find conservative investors who do not pretend they know how to invest their money. And they are willing to subcontract the investment of their money to us, the professionals. And what we're going to sell them? Peace of mind. Peace of mind. We're going to go and say, you want to save money so that in 20 years you have money to educate your children at university level? You want to save money and invest it so that in 30 years when you retire, you have a pension and things like that. We're going to make it. We're going to do it for you. We're going to do it for you. And how do we do it? Face to face. Internet is not for us. We go, we start an office in this little town, America. There's a broker there. The broker goes around, knocks on people's doors and says, can I come in and help you with your investment? That is a strategy. Very successful. Very, very successful. When did they develop? 1972. This is the choices. In fact, I remember that then in 2004, I had the managing director of Edward Jones, the late Jock Bachman. He came to class. Anybody here from 2004, 2005? No, 2005? Yeah, I don't know. Can you remember Jock Bachman in any of my class? No. Anyway, this gentleman walked in, and I still remember it because he had a briefcase. He was talking to the students about Edward Jones. And he opened his briefcase and he pulled out a piece of paper, and you could see there were holes in the paper. That's how old it was. It was like decaying. And there was these type things, like with a typewriter. He says, these are the choices that I just presented to you that I made for Edward Jones in 1972. This is 2004. And afterwards, and he was saying, I made these choices in 1972. It's now 2004. Nothing has changed. And you know the reaction I got from the students afterwards. Like, who the hell is this dinosaur you brought us into the room? 30 years later and it hasn't changed anything. Has he heard about the internet, Costas? The guy was saying, I made this choice in 1972. The question again is, if these are the positioning choices, what the hell did they do for the next 50 years? Anything at all? Yes. The same with Nespresso. They kept asking these questions, like, how do I grow the firm? Do I diversify into other countries, for example? And I remember back in 2008, Edward Jones came to us and said, can you help us expand into Ireland, Netherlands, and the UK? Big choice, that one, to move beyond the American market. Another big choice. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal only last month. For 50 years, they've been saying we're going to have small offices in rural America, not the big cities, rural America, where there's going to be one broker. Not two, not three, one broker. And I remember asking Joe Bachman when I did my case study on them 50 years ago, why only one, John? Why not two? Why not three? And he said, this is a question that McKinsey asks us every year. We have McKinsey as our consultant every year. They come into my office and they say, why should we have only one broker? And I tell them, because if there is one broker in the office, he or she looks at the market and says, these are my customers. And like an entrepreneur, he or she goes and sells. Costas, he said, the moment you put two brokers in the same office, they become managers. They start fighting with each other. Oh, you talk to my customer. That's my territory. Why are you interfering in my territory? Even worse, he said, if you put three in the same office, they become politicians. They kill each other. And then the thing that guy he found very funny, I did not find very funny, he said, the worst is to put four brokers in the same office, Costas, because then they become academics. He really, he was a fantastic man, Joe Bachman, and from St. Louis, Missouri, and so on, that kind of southern. But I did not find that funny at all. I still cannot find it funny. I'm surprised you laughed, but anyway. I'm saying that because 2 months ago in the Wall Street Journal, I was reading that Edward Jones has just announced moving into American big cities. They're going to New York, Los Angeles. For 50 years, they said, we're not going to go to the big cities. And you can imagine, people in the organization say, what? Why? Why not? We target conservative investors who are willing to subcontract their investments. These people live in the big cities as well, right? Why don't you go for them? There are millions of people in the big cities. Why? And they keep, no, now they're going to go into the big cities. And guess what the problem became? All of a sudden, they have their office in New York. And real estate costs in New York are very high compared to Athens, Mississippi, right? So all of a sudden they said, can we afford to have only one broker in every office? So now they said we're going to have 3 and 4 brokers in every office. Do you see what's happening? You start making choices, and we'll come back to this point and so on. So my definition of strategy, ladies and gentlemen, is this one. Strategy is the initial positioning choices plus follow-up choices made over time in response to how do I grow the firm and how do I respond to changes in my market. New technologies come in, customers change, competitors react. How do I change my initial choices to respond to these changes in my market? And just like the original positioning choices, the follow-up choices are also very difficult to make. Very difficult. Can imagine at Edward Jones, people sitting there, should we go into the big cities or not? And I guarantee you, half of the firm is sitting there saying, don't do it, and half of them are saying, we have to do it, we have to grow. Difficult to make. But, and this is my point, there is an added complication now. And what is the complication? The complication now is that in making these follow-up choices, you need to be careful that you do not damage or dilute the original strategic positioning choices. Remember, the original positioning choices is what made you so successful. They are the reason why you became a big company. And now you're making follow-up choices. The danger is you slowly start making additional choices that dilute the original positioning, the original differentiation. You have to be careful not to do that. I've been asking this question for 35 years. How do you make additional choices without diluting the original differentiation? After 35 years, I have the answer. You cannot grow and you cannot respond to changes without diluting a little bit, let's say, the original. Whatever you do, you're going to dilute the original one. So the question is not how do you grow without diluting, but how do you grow without diluting too much? Okay? Now, before you criticize me, let me be the first one to say that I know that sometimes the external changes in the market are so radical that force you to step back and say, look, the original positioning choices are not valid anymore. We need to change whatever we stand for. Total change of strategy. I accept that. I'm not saying strategy is cast in stone or cement, but in the majority of cases, at least the companies I've been working on for 35 years, the issue is not how do I radically change the strategy from going this way to going that way, but no, how do I adjust to the environment out there and grow the firm without damaging too much the underlying choices. And responding to changes without diluting the original is a much bigger problem than you think. It's such a big problem that even Michael Porter wrote about it. And I'm sure you remember the famous article that you all were assigned. Michael Porter, 1996, Harvard Business Review, What is Strategy? Which won the McKinsey Award as the best article written in strategy in 1996. Do you remember it? Do you remember what he says in that article? Of course not. Let me remind you. Let me remind you. Yeah, I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, let alone what I read in HBR 1996. One of the things that Porter says is that in their efforts to grow or respond to changes in their markets, companies often make decisions or take actions that end up diluting the original strategic differentiation. This is a growth trap that companies find it hard to avoid. Because in the article, Porter says, why do managers do it? Having built the success of their company on differentiated choices, why is it that then they start making additional choices that dilute the original ones? And I'm here to tell you, it's the most natural thing to do. You cannot avoid it. Even if you are graduates of London Business School. If you are an INSEAD graduate, I can understand why you mess it up. But even London Business School graduates mess it up. You know, I'll tell you 4 reasons why. I'm going to give you in a moment. With this as background, let me tell you the 2 new challenges that I think we face in a VUCA world, in a volatile world. The first is the danger of diluting the strategic positioning. Why do I say that? Because as we already said, we now live in a world where there's lots of changes. 10, 20, 30 changes around. Now, if you have to respond to one change, you may dilute the original differentiation. But the probability of diluting it is much higher if you have to respond to 20 changes. Because you respond to the first one, let's say you are clever, you are a London Business School graduate, you say, this guy's told me don't dilute it, you're very careful, you don't dilute it. Then another one, you don't dilute it. Then another one, you don't dilute it. Then another one, you don't dilute it. Chances are, if you have 20 changes to respond to, you're not going to be lucky 20 times in a row, are you? Do you see that? I'm not giving you a guarantee that you will do it, but the probability of doing something out of the 20 actions you take to respond to 20 changes, that probability is much higher that you will do something to dilute. And even if each individual decision you make doesn't dilute, over time, the cumulative effect of responding to this change today, and then 2 years doing another thing, and then 3 years doing another thing, and then 3 years doing another thing, the cumulative effect will dilute it, and so on. The risk of diluting this differentiated position is not new to strategy. I mean, Porter wrote about it, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. What is new, in my opinion, is the probability now is much, much higher. And therefore, we have to really pay attention to it now. We didn't have to worry too much about it 20 years ago, but today you have to worry. Because the more changes out there, the more actions you're going to take to respond to changes, the higher the probability you're going to mess it up. And it sounds very easy. What this implies is that every time you are introducing a change or thinking, I may do this in response to growth or whatever, one additional criterion I'm asking you to use is very this. Instead of only saying, I'm going to do this because it's going to grow my market and I have the resources and blah, 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 one additional criterion is ask the question, if I respond to the change, will my actions end up diluting my original strategic difference? It's a very simple question, isn't it? It's not rocket science, is it? And I'm here to tell you, it seems so obvious on the slide. It seems like, yeah, okay, get on with it, man. But I tell you, it's very, 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 can I emphasize that? Very difficult to do it in practice. And there are 4 reasons why. And I see them again and again, and I don't know what the answer is. Number 1, when you're trying to decide, should I do this or that, you use a variety of criteria. Financial criteria, strategic criteria, whatever. One of which is, will it dilute my position? Well, many times you may decide, if I do this, it's going to dilute my positioning, but all the other criteria that you use to evaluate it are so favorable, you say, I don't care if it's going to dilute. It's going to grow the market, it's going to give me billions of dollars. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of dilution for all the other benefits that I'm going to get. That's one. Second reason is that it's very subjective, this question, is it going to dilute? It's very, very subjective. For example, Cosmopolitan. You know Cosmopolitan? They decided to start making yogurt. You find that funny, do you? I think it's a very natural diversification move. What do you think? The customer is very interested in reading the magazine, but also they are interested, obviously, in love. Secrets. 63 secrets to love that lasts. How about that? 63. Plus, losing weight and, being fit. So I'm going to make Cosmopolitan. How many of the ladies in the room will buy Cosmopolitan yogurt? Really? How about Colgate beef lasagna? It doesn't fill you with appetite, these are. And there are other that are not so obvious, Harley Davidson perfume, would it dilute? If you go into perfume as Harley Davidson, would it dilute the brand position? What do you think? How about, Virgin Cola? Tesco wine? How about London Business School expanding its classroom size from 60 to 80 students? Is it going to dilute? What do you think? Because that's part of that debate. In 1996, I was part of that debate at London Business School. We wanted to grow. What's the easiest way to grow? We have 10 classrooms. In every classroom, we have 60 seats. The back row? You remember the back row of the amphitheater? If we put 20 seats in the back row, that means 80 students per room. The cost will remain the same. We pay Costas the same amount whether he teaches 60 students or 80 students. And in the process, we grow 33%. What do you think? Would you do it? Would you do it? Come on. Think about how much we charge you. 20 extra students in every amphitheater. 10 amphitheaters, you know how much that is? 20 times 200. We used to have 600 students, we become 800 students. It's a lot of money. I show up and I told the then dean, I think it's going to dilute the differentiation of London Business School. Well, how do you think my objection was received? You see what the problem is? The problem is, what exactly constitutes? How do you know, Costas, they ask? I think, well, look, as a teacher, there's a difference between teaching 60 students versus 80. I cannot offer them the same office hours anymore. I cannot give them the personal attention. Oh, come on, Costas, you're just avoiding a little bit more extra work. Look at the numbers. Zillions of dollars coming to London Business School. And you're telling me it's going to dilute the differentiation of London. Get out of here. And even if they say it's going to dilute it, how much dilution are we talking about here? 2%? 5%? 10%? Can anybody answer that question? You see, the problem is they are so subjective, these things. Even when you raise them in an organization, people say, how do you know it's going to dilute, first of all? And secondly, how much is it going to dilute? And you measure the dilution relative to the profit you're going to get by doing that one. And you say, well, look, you don't know. So there's a lot of shouting and screaming, and God wins out. What wins out in the end in organizations? The financial or the non-financial arguments? Okay, I'll leave it up to your judgment on that one, okay? It's not only that the financials win out. The other problem we face is the following. The financial gains of the change appear in the short term. The cost of dilution, if they materialize, take time. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Imagine being the manager, trying to make a decision right now. And I show up and say, no, don't do it, because I think it's going to dilute the differentiation. And 10, 20 years down the road, we're going to suffer as a result. Are you worried? Are you worried that in 20 years, it's not for sure, it may dilute the differentiation of London Business School? Are you worried? Why are you not worried? Where are you going to be in 20 years? You're going to be on the beach in Cyprus. And people show up in 20 years and say, are you the bastard who 20 years ago took that decision that 20 years later is diluting the brand? Are you kidding me? First of all, I'm retired by now, so I focus on the financial results that are the short term and determine my pay. And secondly, who in their right mind is going to make a connection between the dilution I see in 2045 with a decision taken in 2025? No way. Can you prove to me that the dilution was because of the decision I took 20 years ago? No, get lost. As simple as that. So people focus on the financials for these reasons. And there is a fourth reason why it's difficult. It's not one decision that dilutes the positioning. It's never one. If it's one big one, you can see it. If you are Colgate and you say, I'm going to go into beef lasagna, chances are enough people in the organization are going to say, wait a minute, you're going to dilute the bloody brand by doing that. It's obvious. You saw how you all laughed here because you thought it was a stupid idea, didn't you? It's not one big decision, because the big decision, people see it and say, no, no, don't do it. It's a collection of many small decisions that cumulatively, year after year after year, and you wake up one morning, oh my God, what diluted the brand? Nothing. It's a series of small decisions. And the problem, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is that when you're evaluating a decision and you say, is it going to dilute the brand? You may say, no, I don't think, a little bit. Oh, let's do it. 2 years later, is it going to dilute the brand? No, a little bit. Okay, let's do it. 3 years later, is this going to dilute? No, let's do it. Every time you evaluate it, it's not going to dilute the brand. It's a cumulative effect that you are. This is a busy slide. All it's saying is it's very, very difficult to apply the criterion I told you, which is how do you make additional decisions, strategic decisions, without diluting the underlying differentiation. It's more difficult than I make it sound, okay? What are some of the solutions? These are the standard ones, very, very boring. I'm going to give you the interesting one that I recently discovered. I recently discovered it by reading an article about opera. And the people who wrote it, they studied this in the opera context, and they said the opera companies have a problem. Their problem is that it's mostly elderly people who are interested in this product. How many of you go to opera? Okay. Elderly and London Business School graduates like to go to this. And we want to attract younger generation. We want young people to come to the opera. Well, how can we do it? We have to innovate. We have to change the opera to make it attractive to young ones. But then, of course, the question is, how can I innovate the product without undermining it in the eyes of the existing customers, right? How can I do that? So they were thinking about it, and they came up with the following solution. They said, when you look at what opera is, you have to make an assessment. What are the core elements of the opera that you shouldn't touch? You should say, these are the characteristics of the opera we shouldn't innovate with, we shouldn't change. They are there like things in the Bible, never change. And then there are some peripheral elements that you can innovate on. And in the opera context, the decision they made was that the music and the story of the opera are core elements of opera. You don't change that. You don't change the music, you don't change the story. But you could change the location where the opera is taking place, the time when the opera is taking place. So for example, let me give you an example. The Barber of Seville. How many of you are familiar with that opera? Yeah? So this is a beautiful opera. It's about a gentleman whose job it is to be a barber. Very good. Where? In Seville. Okay, excellent. So far, so good. You are still with me, despite being 40 minutes into the bloody thing. Okay. It's about a barber in Seville. The year is 1810, I think, when it was first introduced as an opera. And you know the story? Story is this guy, he loves this young lady, but she's protected by this jealous guy. So the whole story is all about all the attempts he makes over time, over 2 hours, to win the heart of the young lady. Guess what the happy ending is? She wins, and they get married. She wins the young lady. It's a very Hollywood kind of opera and so on. So these guys in New York, they say, okay, this is a story, but it doesn't have to be about a barber. It can be about an investment banker. It doesn't have to be about Seville. It can be about an investment banker in New York. It doesn't have to be about a barber in Seville in 1800. It can be about an investment banker in New York in 2025. That's what they did. There's an opera now in New York, which is not about the barber of Seville, it's about the investment banker in New York. And they think that is innovation in terms of the peripheral elements of the opera and keeping the story. The story is the same. Investment banker meets this lovely girl, she wants to marry her, Gaba, 2 hours later they marry, but it takes 2 hours to get married. Okay? So there's a story there that stays the same, the music is the same, but then, whether you agree or not with this, I like this idea, by the way, because it has a very important implication for strategy, which is what? We have to sit down and think about a strategy which is made up of various elements and say, what are the core elements of our strategy that we shouldn't touch? What are some of these core elements of our strategy that, look, no matter what happens, we shouldn't change? And what are some of the peripheral elements that we can innovate with to attract new customers and so on? And of course, I don't have to tell you, what is a core and what is peripheral is very difficult to assess. That's why you should wait until next year to buy the new book that's coming out. It's very, very good. It's interesting. I mean, it's very subjective, this one. I think it's very, very, just to give you an espresso, I talk to them, what do you consider? If you actually sit down with the management team and you go through a workshop for 2-3 hours, where senior people who know the company really well discuss and say, what is core to here? Over time, I think you will agree on some elements that you say these are. So for example, when I did this with Nespresso, they said, look, the value proposition, we shouldn't change. We are not selling coffee here. We're selling aspiration. That's a positioning. We shouldn't change that. The customer we're targeting, this is the customer. We're not going to change that, and so on. The distribution method. These are some of the core elements that we are not going to touch, and the rest we can touch, and so on. You could do it with your management, but it's very, very difficult. Let me give you very quickly, I'm going to skip this one. Let me give you very quickly what I consider to be the second challenge in this VUCA well, which is lack of clarity. Lack of clarity is a big problem in strategy. You know what I mean by lack of clarity? Lack of clarity is, if you ask the CEO of a company, do you have a clear strategy? What do you think the CEO say? 100% say, yeah, I have a very clear strategy. Everybody knows it, and they're committed to it. And then you go and do a survey of everybody in the company. What percent of employees do you think say, I know the strategy? It depends on the survey you look, but anything between 85 and 95% of people say, I don't know the strategy. It's always a source of frustration for these CEOs. When I tell them I just done a survey of your company and 93% of your employees say they don't know the strategy, these CEOs say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I've communicated my strategy 1 million times. I have town hall meetings every week telling them a bloody strategy. How can they not know the strategy? Are they deaf or stupid? I had the same issue with Francois 10 years ago because I did a survey of all the strategy professors of London Business School. We have 20 strategy professors. I didn't even go to the accounting and finance people who wouldn't know what strategy is even if it hit them in the face. I don't think we have any accounting colleagues in here, are we? Everything we say is confidential, you realize that. Anyway, so I asked 20 professors of strategy at London Business School, do you know the strategy of London Business School? Do you know how many of them said, I know the strategy? 0. Not even I know the bloody strategy. So you can imagine the reaction of Francois when I told him that. I said, look, nobody knows the strategy. He's like, what are you talking about? I just spent 1 week, communicating the strategy of London. How is it that they don't know the strategy? It's not a mystery. I think it's a mystery, isn't it? We'll come to it why. But this is a big problem in strategy. And all I'm saying is it's an even bigger problem now. In a VUCA well, it is an even bigger problem, not knowing the strategy. Why? It has to do with agility. Let me give you my train of thought here. It has 5 points, so I put them down one by one. First point is, in today's world, agility is essential. Would you agree with that? Yeah, very, very important that we recognize the changes early, we respond to them quickly, very, very important. Secondly, one of the most effective ways to achieve agility, I'm not saying, is decentralized decision making, giving people autonomy. I remember when I was in Chicago interviewing the CEO of the biggest HR consultancy in the world, and I asked him, you are a very agile organization, you seem to identify changes and respond to them very quickly. How do you do it? And the CEO, she said to me, the reason I'm so agile, Costas, is because I've employed 12,000 spies to work for my company. 12,000, some of them CIA trained, some of them KGB. Their job is every day to monitor what's happening and come and knock on my door and say, boss, there's something going on. Need to respond. And I said, spies? What the hell are you talking about? You know what she said? We call them employees. 12,000 employees. I give them autonomy to monitor, wherever they are in the empire. They are close to the market, close to the customer. They see what's happening. Much better than me sitting here in Chicago. So these people, I give them autonomy to see what's happening, to respond quickly and so on. So we know, if you go and look at one of the most famous examples of rapid response to COVID is the Chinese manufacturer Haier. H-A-I-E-R, I can never pronounce the name, so I'm spelling it Haier. You know Haier, the Chinese? It's a very famous case study, this one, because during COVID, it took them 2 months from the beginning of COVID to get all their factories up to speed, functioning 100% capacity utilization. By the end of February 2020, Haier was fully operational. All of the other firms in the universe were still trying to figure out what the hell is this COVID and what do I do with my supply chains. These guys, within 2 months, they were fully operational. So people went and studied. Many case studies have been written about how did they become so? And the answer is decentralized decision making. If you look at the organizational structure of this firm, they broke it up into many autonomous units, micro-enterprises they could call them. And each unit was responsible to respond to COVID as they saw fit based on their local environment. And the collection of all these units responding was the firm responded very, very quickly. So we know that agility requires autonomy, okay? The third point is autonomy does not mean everybody can do whatever they want. Autonomy has to take place within certain parameters, right? So the question then is, okay, what are these parameters? The idea being when you're trying to make a decision with autonomy, if the decision you're making falls within these parameters, you have autonomy to make it. If the decision falls outside these parameters, you cannot make it. Do you understand the premise? So as a professor of London Business School, every day I make decisions. For example, I have to decide what exam to give my students. Who decides that, me or should I call my dean? Do I make it or should I call my dean? I have autonomy to make that decision. I also have to decide whether to give people a coffee break. Who decides that, me or should I call the dean? You give me autonomy to make that answer. I have to decide what case to use during my teaching. Who makes that decision? Me or me? And one of the things I want to decide upon is one day I like to show up at London Business School and teach naked. Don't ask why. It's been in my back of my mind for 35 years. Who makes that decision? You again. Do I have autonomy to make that decision? No. Of course not, because it's going to destroy the brand reputation of London Business School, right? It's a big enough decision and so on. So you see the point. The point is, autonomy doesn't mean you decide anything you want. Autonomy has to play within certain parameters. What are these parameters? It could be the values of the organization, telling you what is right and what is wrong. It could be the purpose that guides your direction. But we know one of the biggest parameters that guide people is the clear strategy. One of these parameters is the clear strategic choice of the organization. What does that mean, guys? It means that, let's say I'm a subsidiary manager somewhere in the empire, and I have to make a decision, change the customer, change the product. How do I decide whether I do that with autonomy or whether I inform corporate headquarters? I ask myself, what I'm about to do, does it fit within the strategy of my organization or is it outside the strategy? If it fits with the strategy, I have autonomy to make it. If it doesn't, I don't. Therefore, a clear strategy is very, very important for giving people autonomy. And this is the challenge. Lack of strategic clarity, if they don't know the strategy, will be lethal for agility. Why? No clear strategy, no autonomy. No autonomy, no agility. No agility, death. I think in today's world, lack of clarity is not like a luxury that you can afford anymore. You have to make sure people in the organization know the strategy. And the question then is, how? How? In today's vocabulary, we cannot have lack of clarity. It's imperative to find ways to make it clear to our people what our strategy is. Well, how? I'm going to give you two suggestions how, based on why is strategy not clear now. If we find the reasons why it's not clear now and remove them, maybe we can have a better clarity. One has to do with what do we communicate to people, and the other is how we communicate to people, the strategy. Let me explain what I mean. One is improve what you communicate to people. And by that I mean, remember how I define strategy? Strategy are choices, choices, choices. So when you stand in front of people and you want to communicate them the strategy, what do you have to communicate? Choices, choices, choices. Is that what you communicate? Is that what you communicate? You communicate, not you. We communicate, corporate. Do you know what that BS stands for? Corporate bullshit. That's what you communicate. Shall I give you an example? This is a strategy statement from a big multinational here in Europe. Look at this. The key elements of our strategy are as follows. Continue our focus on delivering operational excellence. Leverage the benefits of our integrated model. Reinforce our technological leadership and make intelligent and disciplined investments. What do you think? Is this a clear statement of strategy? This is corporate bullshit. That's all it is. Look, I mean, just to make you understand what I'm talking about. Look at the last statement. Make intelligent and disciplined investments. So you're telling me that you and your senior management team, you were sitting there saying, we have a difficult choice to make in this organization, very difficult. You know, tough one, tough one. Should we make intelligent and disciplined investments? Or should we make stupid and undisciplined ones? Ooh, that's a tough, maybe you should hire McKinsey to help us with that. Is that a choice? Is that a choice, ladies? It's not a choice. That's a motherhood. Where is the choice? Whenever you look at these statements, ask yourself, what is the alternative? What is the alternative to what you're telling me that you obviously evaluated and rejected in favor of this choice? Reinforce our technological leadership. As opposed to what? Undermine our technological leadership. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You laugh with it, but these are serious people putting it up in front of employees. You know, let me give you another example. I interviewed the CEO of a major global hotel chain. If you stayed in a business hotel around the world, you've stayed in this hotel. And I asked him, what's your strategy? He said, wow, very clear strategy, Costas, very clear. Concise, to the point. I said, what is it? There it is. Our strategy has 4 pillars. Winning with our customers, leading with our culture, expanding our network, and maximizing our performance. And your reaction is, where should I go and vomit? Right? Look at that. Winning with our, as opposed to what? Losing with our customers? Are these choices? These are not choices. These are academic mambo jumbo or corporate bullshit and so on. So my first point is very simple. You know, please stop communicating bullshit. Start communicating the choices of your organization. That's one way to improve clarity instead of, don't get me started about London Business School on this one, okay? Communicate the choices. The second thing I'm going to encourage you is how you communicate. Let me give you 2 statements, and you tell me which of the 2 statements make the choice clearer. It's from London Business School, this example. It's a 2 story. Here it is. Statement 1 says, we chose for the Executive Education Department of London Business School to remain an integral part of London Business School. Versus, we chose for the Executive Education Department to remain part of London Business School rather than spin it off as a separate entity. Which statements makes the choice clearer? How many think it's number 1? How many think it's number 2? You see, that's why you're London Business School graduate. Yeah. Had I asked this question at INSEAD, you know what I will have. Can you tell me, please, what makes the second much clearer? What makes the second statement so much clearer? Sorry? The what? What not to? The alternative. The alternative. Because when Francois came to my office 10 years ago and said, Costas, I made a clear choice here at London Business School. I said, what's the choice? The choice is we're going to keep executive education an integral part of London Business School. I was sitting there and said, wait a minute. It's always been part of London Business School. Why is that a choice? And it's only when he said, obviously you're not part of management board, Costas, because for the last 6 months we've been debating in management board whether we should spin off executive education as a separate entity, and these are the benefits we're going to have. But I decided, no, it has to be part of London Business School, constrained by the values of an academic institution. There are many benefits to spinning it off. I don't want to get into the details of it and so on. But what made the choice clear was, there is an alternative. And it's a credible alternative. It's not a bullshit alternative that you put there for the sake of it. It's a credible alternative whereby if you actually debate it in an organization, chances are people in the organization, some of them will say, I disagree with the choice you made. It's a credible alternative. But my point is very simple. I hope you agree with me, first of all, that the second statement makes the choice much clearer. And what makes it clearer is placing it next to the alternative. Do you know what that implies for your strategy? What it implies for strategy is it's not enough to communicate choices to people. It's important, don't get me wrong. My first point is instead of communicating academic mambo jumbo, communicate the choices, but it's not enough. You have to communicate the choices, and what else? The alternatives you consider for every choice and you reject it. Shall I give you an example? My friends at Edward Jones, look at their strategy document. Look at their strategy statement. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I know you're tired. I know it's almost 5 o'clock. You've been listening to my mambo jumbo for 55 minutes. Half of you are obviously tired. And because I wanted you to really notice what I'm trying to say here, I put the magic word that I want you to really notice in red. Can you see it? Can you see the magic word? Yes? Can you see it? It's the word no. It's the word no. Because if you say to people, we're going to target individual investors in rural America, you may think it's clear. But what makes it even clearer is to say, we're going to target individual investors in rural America, not in the big towns. It's like, and you know why? First of all, it makes it clearer. And the other thing it does, it invites people to challenge you. It invites people to question you. Say, wait, boss, wait a minute. Why are you not going to the big cities? Why are not selling our own products? Why? When they see the alternative, they say, they think, why not? It encourages people to challenge you. It encourages people to engage you in a debate, in a dialogue. And this is what clarifies the strategy. It's not the clear articulation of what you say. It's the fact that you engage people in a debate. It's the fact that you engage them in a dialogue. That's what clarifies what you were saying. You want to encourage people to, because whenever I say this, encourage people to argue with you about strategy, CEOs say to me, Costas, I stand in front of my people, I tell them the strategy for half an hour, and then I ask, do you have any questions? And nobody has any questions. They all sit there like, no, get me out of this room. Like you're probably thinking right now. We have to help people ask questions. We have to encourage them, make it easier for them to challenge you, because that's the debate, the dialogue is what clarifies things. And one way to do it is by putting the alternatives next to the choices and so on. So do not only tell your people the choices you have made, tell them the choices and the alternatives you consider and reject. This is what invites people to challenge you, to have a discussion with you, and it is this discussion that has improves clarity at the end of the day. It's not whether you're clear in whatever you're saying. What you communicate should be the choices, not academic mambo jumbo, and how you communicate it is choices and alternatives, okay? So my summary for the day, after 1 hour of me screaming and shouting, is In today's VUCA world, you have to respond to changes without diluting the original strategic differentiation of the firm that made you successful to begin with. It's very, very, please don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate, it's very, very, I've seen it in action again and again in organization. It's very, very difficult to make that assessment, but you have to keep it at the back of your head, always at the back of your head. I was talking to Christian Van Tilo, who is the owner of DPG Media in Belgium and in Holland, and I asked him, how do you maintain your strategy, focus on whatever you're doing? He said, look, the problem with managers is that they see opportunities all over the place. All the time. People show up and they say, boss, let's go and acquire the Daily Telegraph in the United Kingdom. It's available for sale. Let's go and do this. There's always opportunities. And I always say to them, does it fit with the strategy? But for them to answer that question, they need to know what the strategy is. And that's what I have. I have a board of independent people who challenge me whenever I get carried away and want to invest in an opportunity that doesn't fit with my strategy. So that's what you want. And the second thing is you cannot afford this lack of clarity. Change the way you communicate and how you communicate to your people. Thank you very much. We have a whole minute for any questions you may have. Thanks. Thank you. No, seriously, the only thing you have now is to go to a party, so surely you can spend another 2-3 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to apologize I took long. Go ahead, please.
What a marvelous presentation.
Thank
you so much. I have a question about, the core and the peripheral elements. Sometimes, and taking the example of Nespresso, that you have, that neither the core nor the elements are going to survive. Yeah. And sometimes the VUCA is so disrupting that you have to even consider everything. So
I totally agree with you. Sometimes a fundamental change is necessary. Look at Netflix, for example. Netflix started out as a distributor of DVDs. They went into streaming of the content, which is a fundamental change of the positioning, and now into production of the original content and the streaming and so on. Three fundamental changes of the original positioning. There are many examples like that. Microsoft, under Nadella in 2014, they changed fundamentally the strategy. Now, I don't deny that, and you have to be alert as a manager. Say, wait a minute, I know this strategy is a long-term thing, and it has to give us direction and that kind of thing, but maybe the environment out there has changed so much that we need to change the strategy. You should be asking that question all the time because, like I said, strategy is not cast in concrete. Sometimes you have to fundamentally change it. But the point I want to make is that you'll be surprised how rare that is. We use the word change very loosely. People say, we have to change our strategy. Change can be 10% change. It can be 40% change. It can be 60% change. And it can be 100% change, where we fundamentally change the strategy. When we use the word change, we don't always mean fundamentally change the whole strategy and the whole positioning. Nespresso fundamentally changed the positioning back in 1989 from what it was to what, and so on. Sometimes you get that. It's rarer than you think. It's rarer than, even in today's VUCA world, and this is what people always disagree with me, say, oh, come on, Costas, you live in the past, and so on and so forth. As if, there's any possibility of me living in the future. I don't know how to live in the future. I always live in the present or the past. Anyway, so I think you have to use your common sense sometimes and say, look, do I really? Because the other danger you face, which I see sometimes in companies, if you look at Yahoo ended up flip-flopping strategy so often that, it's easy to sit there and say, oh, lots of changes, we need to change strategy. So you change strategy, and then 6 months down the road, you say, oh my God, the environment has changed again, let's change the strategy again, and you go that way. And then 6 months, oh, have to change again. You see, the other extreme is flip-flopping, which confuses people and dilutes your resources. You invest here and there and there, and before you know it, you become like Yahoo, a failure. So, there are balances here that you have to keep in mind and use your common sense, I think, to decide. Yeah? Go ahead, please. Maybe we need the microphone.
Hi. Please be as truthful as you have been throughout this presentation. My question is, do you think that there is really a strategy to anticipate the next black swan, or it's BS?
No. I know what you're saying. First of all, the Clay Christensen and the people of disruptive innovation did us a disservice by presenting disruption as something that grows, and over time cannibalizes core. The real challenge that companies face is not how do I respond to a disruption. The real challenge is at any given time, there's 20 things happening around you, and you don't know. You don't know which one of this is going to grow. Which one is going to grow? You really don't know. In fact, I'll give you an example of, we had John Fallon, who was the CEO of Pearson, come and talk to the students here. He was the CEO of Pearson between 2013, 2022, 23. And he was telling us the story. He said, when I became CEO, one of the big divisions in Pearson, he said, was Penguin, the publishing house. And a big technology came into that industry back in 2012, 13, that was destroying the business. What was it? Self-publishing, he said. Authors, traditional business is that people will write their book and go to a publisher to publish it for them and market it and distribute it. Self-publishing came in as a technology whereby the authors could go through Amazon, publish their book, and distribute it on their own, and so on. So all my people came to me and said, John, big technological innovation happening in the industry is going to bypass Penguin, it's going to destroy it. We have to do something. So what did I do? He said, I went out and made an acquisition, about 120 million, and we bought a self-publishing house. And I spent the next 10 years investing to grow the business. He spent about 500 million, he said. And then in 2022, we look at the market, and what did we see? Self-publishing as a business model did not grow. So for example, if they found out that in 2022, how many copies of their book did the average author sell through self-publishing? Think about that. If I go through Amazon and publish my book, how many copies do you think, on average, people sold? 5. 5 copies, mostly to their wives and children. It didn't grow at all. Obviously, the publisher played a very important role there, which is the marketing and distribution, which we underestimated how important it is and so on. So effectively, John says, you know what happened? I just invested 500 million in a technology and a business model that 10 years later, it didn't grow. So I had to, suffer the loss. He mentioned another one. He did a joint venture with Apple, $1 billion to have online teaching in the Los Angeles elementary school system. After a year and a half, it totally bombed. We had to withdraw and so on. We lost another $1 billion there. $500 million here, $1 billion there. The question, of course, is, could he have done something else to evaluate whether this change is going to grow or not? And the answer is, there was something he could have done. When you see all these things around you, some may grow, some may not grow, how do you know which one is going to grow?
Core versus peripheral.
Peripheral, yeah, core versus peripheral, or what would you do? Lots of things happening, you don't know what's going to grow. You have to buy yourself some time, what do? Experiment. You try a little experiment with a new technology, to spend a little bit of money, buy yourself some time. You learn also over time. The next year you make another assessment. Should I continue the experiment or not? The next year. So you buy yourself a little bit of time by experimenting, learning about whether this is growing and so on, learning what works and what doesn't work. And then at a certain point you say, okay, I'm going to put the 500 million down here. I think can I predict the next one? No, I cannot. But all of these changes happening around us, maybe one of them will become the black swan. All you have to do is be there or thereabout, so that all of a sudden, when it becomes a big swan, you are there and you know about it, you've experimented with it, and you are ready to exploit it and so on. Yeah, but you cannot predict the future. I mean, it's impossible, I think, to know at a certain point in time what's going to happen later and so on. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. One last question? Free of charge. I'm not going to charge for this extra question. Go ahead. No.
There's one question that I will not be able to go home and sleep if you don't answer it. Did Colgate add fluoride to the lasagna?
Did Colgate
add fluoride to their lasagna?
I don't know.
That is the
I don't know. But, you laugh with these decisions. But, sometimes it's only after the fact that you know whether something is going to work or not. And, even with hindsight, you look at it and say, what a stupid decision and so on. I mean, Coca-Cola in 1985 went into wines, okay? They said, I have the distribution, I have the marketing capabilities, I can reach the whole world, I don't have to make the wines myself. I can buy a winery, they know how to make the wine, and I just assume the distribution. So they had Coca-Cola wines, and it failed, obviously, and we look at it now and say, what a stupid idea. Well, why is that stupid? And now you have Tesco selling you Tesco wines, and you go and buy it. I don't know if you buy it, but some people buy it, yeah, and so on. Why? I mean, sometimes you don't really know, with all the analysis and so on, whether it's going to work or not. So sometimes a little bit of experimentation may be the answer to the problem. Okay? Thank you very much. See you at dinner tonight.